When it comes to cybersecurity, the number one, I guess you're only as strong as your weakest link. And in many cases, when it comes to cybersecurity, the weakest link is the users, the actual, human beings behind the computer.
Welcome to the Business Behind Your Business, conversations to help your business grow and thrive. Hi, I'm Paul Sweeney, founder of Pretium Solutions, chartered accountants and certified business advisors, hosting the Business Behind Your Business. Welcome to the Business Behind Your Business, and today we're joined again by Luke Iacovelli from Unitech IT Solutions. So welcome back to the podcast, Luke.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Good morning, everyone.
Great. And Luke, last time we had you on the podcast, we were talking about, IT for small business, but we mentioned cybersecurity, and really that's a topic or a number of topics on its own. So we're going to have a look today at cybersecurity and why every business needs to be aware of it and have a strategy for it. So I guess, look, it's traditionally viewed as the domain of the big companies, that they're the ones that are attacked the most and suffer, but that's not really the case. But before we talk about cybersecurity, can we actually define what cybersecurity is? Because I think there are people out there with different understandings of what it actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, cybersecurity has become a really big topic or buzzword or theme that seems to be reflecting right across business. Micro, small, medium, and large. In essence, what cybersecurity is any form of external attack or penetration of your network environment, whether that is on-premise with servers in a system or in the cloud. And the idea behind that is to cause disruption to your business operation or extract data from your network for the purposes of collecting ransom money or, causing some sort of inconvenience to the business through the use of your data. That's a high level sort of overview of what cybersecurity essentially is, or a cyber attack. So cybersecurity is all of the mechanisms around that to help prevent those attacks from happening and to help sort of protect that company data as best as possible.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of cybersecurity, we tend to look at what we can control and the things within our office or computer environment, our own environment. But a lot of those cybersecurity issues can affect us from outside those walls.
Absolutely. So a perfect example would be in recent times with COVID, a lot of organisations have sent staff home. They're working in remote environments, and so the situation becomes a staff members using their own personal computer to gain access to company emails or company files. The company has no control over that person's personal computer, yet that computer may have been compromised, which essentially opens the doorway for the cyber criminals to get in. So in that particular example, a business may have all of the measures in place to try and prevent cyber attack from happening, but their personal computer has been essentially the mechanism to get in. So it's not just your corporate network environment. It really is quite across any form of technology that a personal user may use in an environment to gain access to that sort of information.
Mm-hmm. So there's multiple ways that this can happen, and so you mentioned a few of those. What are some of the more common ones that small business owners particularly need to be aware of?
Well, look, I guess there's many different ways that cyber criminals get into networks or attempt to try and get into networks. Probably the biggest one would be ransomware, which that tends to affect far more of the small to medium business space. That's essentially finding a loophole, getting into the network and corrupting all of the data on the systems, whether they be on-premise or in the cloud, and basically holding the business to ransom. You pay us some money and we will release that information to you. That seems to be the biggest one that we see a lot of in the small to medium space. And there's three outcomes that can happen from this. Either you pay the ransom and you get your data released, you pay the ransom and you don't get your data released, or you pay attempt to pay the ransom and they come back to you and ask you for more money, and it just becomes a vicious cycle. There's a lot of case studies out there that have described all three of those examples, and the outcomes. Some have been favourable, some have not, but that tends to be more typically the type that we see in that small to medium space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess so. Ransomware, how does that come in? I think at some point we were talking before, and there was a statistic that you came up with. It said like 9 out of 10 cyber attacks begin with an email. Now,
yeah,
what are the ways that happens?
Yeah, look, generally what you find is when it comes to cybersecurity, the number one, I guess you're only as strong as your weakest link. And in many cases, when it comes to cybersecurity, the weakest link is the users, the actual, human beings behind the computer. You could have the best systems in the world doing what they do best, but if someone clicks on something or does something at a user level, then you can potentially compromise a lot of the work. So with ransomware, generally what happens is it comes in via an email. So an unsuspecting user is sitting there going through their emails. They suddenly receive a random email, possibly, some common ones are, Australia Post, Taxation Office, electricity bill, utilities, that type of stuff. They look, feel, are laid out and behave very similar to what, the user is used to. They might be expecting the parcel. They may have to pay their bills. They click on a link. That does two things. They can either at that point be requested to enter some information, which out of necessity or habit the user does, or clicking on the link introduces the virus or the ransomware into the network. And that ransomware could either happen instantaneously or sit dormant in the background for a period of time until it's, something triggers it to be activated from there. So generally emails, very, very common. They can come in from other methods, such as, sending out, emails with an attachment. And if there's no virus protection or the attachment hasn't been scanned, also clicking on web links and certain, websites that aren't properly protected. So there's a multitude of ways, but emails, as I said, 9 out of 10 times, it's usually an email that will trigger it off.
And so you described a situation where an email comes in looking like a valid email, and that I think that's got there's a term for that kind of email. Is that what they call phishing?
Correct, absolutely. So a phishing email, and the essence of that is to collect information from a user. So the phishing email tends to be the one more where you have to actually enter in some information yourself. So you might click on that Australia Post link, for example, and might ask you for an email address, possibly a mobile number, some other information. You enter that information in, you click a button, it captures that information. That might happen, that phishing process may happen for months. And what these cyber criminals are doing is essentially collecting this information about you. They're building a profile, as much information as they can about you, date of birth, email, mobile, whatever it might be, to then use that information to initiate some sort of cyber attack, whether it's, to your bank, whether it's to your mobile account, whether it's to your, 365 systems, whatever it is that it might be, to then introduce ransomware or, hold you to ransom for some purpose. So phishing emails are becoming far more sophisticated now than they ever have. They are looking and feeling exactly like, what a user is expected to see from that particular organization that's supposed to have sent it. And so you're none the wiser.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the cyber criminals, they work on spread the net as widely as they can, and if they catch a few fish, then
absolutely. Yeah, it's a numbers game for them. So they will distribute, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of emails. And the idea is it's not the big. So they're after a small amount from a lot of people. So a numbers game from their perspective. And so, that's sort of how they make their revenue. And I use the term revenue because cyber crime is actually a business, that it is a professional business that exists, and not many people are aware of that. But, cyber criminals have access to exactly the same systems that everyone else has. They've got development, they've got a black market, they've got everything that they need to be able to professionally attack your business and get that information. But the one that seems to be just linking back into the phishing emails, what tends to happen nowadays is what they call domain spoofing, whereby if you have a domain, so in our case it's unitech.com.au, UNITECH, they will grab that domain and they will register a spoofed domain such as unitech.com, spelt with a K, or they might drop the H. They'll make a very slight variation to the email domain. Now, most people, when they receive an email, are not sitting there looking at who's the sender, checking the domain. All they know is that Luke works for Unitech. He sent me an email with an attachment. Therefore, it's deemed to be legitimate. They haven't checked my domain. They haven't done all that sort of stuff. They click on the link and away they go. So they're even getting sophisticated to the point of, spoofing domains in the world to make them look as identical as they possibly can. And generally you'll find the spoofing emails exist when there's financial transactions that take place between businesses. So, sending bills, I need to have this deposit paid. They spoof the domain. They send out a fake invoice with separate bank account details. The money's transacted and it's gone.
Yeah, so and I guess there's some well-known brands in there, and you did mention the financial side. We're talking about the Australian Taxation Office and
yes.
Centrelink, Australia Post, PayPal, Telstra comes up quite a lot.
Yes,
and even like accounting packages like Xero, and I'm not sure about the others, but I know that there was at one point a series of, I guess, phishing emails purporting to be from Xero. So a lot of small businesses use Xero as their accounting package. So that you do need to be careful. And I think this is where we tie into it not just being an IT issue, it's also a people issue. And understanding who you're dealing with, knowing who you're dealing with. Yeah.
The common misconception is that cybersecurity and cybercrime, it's an IT issue. It is, but it's not the only issue. It's actually not really an IT issue. It's a management and business issue. So everything from the user right through to the systems in the back end, everyone is responsible for being aware of it, and everyone is responsible for trying to mitigate and avoid it as much as possible. So, it's not just your IT supplier or manager or team that's responsible for this. Everyone across the organization needs to be, and it really, really starts with end user awareness. That is by far the biggest and most important point to mention, educating the staff about being aware of cybersecurity, cybercrime, what to look out for, but even having the discussion to say to them, look, looking at our business as a whole, where do you see the potential cyber risks so that we can put measures in place to mitigate that? That is a very important conversation to have with everybody, from reception to accounts to finance to operations, the whole lot, because, the bigger the organization, the more doorways there are for them to get in. And a lot of businesses are using, a lot more technology now. They're really capitalizing on the cloud and how that works. So, your operations team in the factories are using systems which are different to the finance and accounting team, which is different to, the sales guys, which might be using a CRM. So you've got all these different systems, quite often independent of each other, being managed by different vendors. And so there's different levels of security in place with all of those vendors that needs to be, reviewed. That's why these discussions are very important to have.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking in there's a good example of different, like I guess, slightly larger organisations with different areas, different job functions using different tools. But if we sort of scale it back a little bit and look at your typical small micro business or even your medium-sized business where there might be 10 or 15 employees, it's not uncommon these days for them to use, I guess, say 5 or 6 main software tools or applications, but also link in with other I guess more generic processes like your PayPal, your Google, Microsoft, and that. And there's a number of connections because a lot of this software is designed to integrate, but where are those connections happening, and who's controlling the data in that situation?
Yeah, well, look, when you've got multiple vendors, quite often you're paying fees to those individual vendors, and therefore it is the responsibility of the individual vendors to be providing the support for that particular product. So, for example, a client that might be using 365 for their emails and SharePoint data may also be using Xero for their accounting. They might be using another CRM for their client management and relationship systems, or Salesforce and things like that. There is a lot of integration now that exists between different platforms, and quite a lot of that integration, not many people are aware, but you can actually centralize a lot of that through a single level of platform. So, for example, if you're using 365, you can set up a single 365 sign-on, which will integrate with things like Salesforce and other applications. So you're eliminating as much additional configuration and work that's required at the different vendor levels, centralizing them as much as possible so that you just log in once, you manage one user and one account in one location, you apply those security measures at that level, and that's then fed through to Salesforce and some of these other CRMs. That's not always the case, as not everyone is caught up or at the same level, but where possible, it's always advised to look at that type of, single sign-on systems. And we've helped a lot of clients look at that and sort of say, well, look, there are integration tools with these different platforms. If we've got, the high level of security in 365 and we've introduced multi-factor authentication and all these other security measures at a 365 level, they will feed through and apply to all of these other vendors. The other the other thing that happens too is these vendors will come back and say to you, well, look, you don't have, MFA, for example, on your Xero account, you need to apply it. A lot of them are making this mandatory now and providing, clients with deadlines as to when they need to be introduced. So we're seeing a lot more, uptake of some of these additional cyber, because the vendors themselves are trying to keep up with the evolution of the cyber criminals. So it's just a constant battle. A step forward in cybersecurity, there's a step forward in the attack. So it's a forever evolving fluid type of relationship.
Yeah, and so you mentioned multi-factor authentication. So
Yep.
Can you give a couple of examples of how that might work?
Absolutely. So multi-factor authentication, or two-factor authentication, as it's commonly known as, is basically two forms of logging in to get access to a system. So traditionally, it was a username and password. We're all very familiar with that sort of concept. And what happens now is the introduction of multi-factor says, well, look, in order to get in, you need to either A, answer some security questions, which is a little bit of the oldest type of method, or nowadays they send you a text message or a code to your phone through an authentication app, and you need to enter that code in. So on top of knowing your username and password, you need to also have your phone with you, which is assigned to yourself, which will give you that code. If your phone is stolen or whatever and you don't have access to that code, you can't get in. So the purpose behind all of this is if you're busy working away and suddenly your phone goes off to say that someone's trying to access your system and here's the code for it and it's not you, you at that point can immediately identify that there's been a breach. You can deny them access from your phone and then take the necessary steps to reset your password and go from there. So that's being applied to things like your Apple ID, your Gmail, Google accounts, Microsoft 365. That's now mandatory on all new installations, and right across the vendors that use cloud-based systems, MYOB, Xero, Salesforce, all of them are introducing this concept. So going back to what I was saying before, having multi-factor across all these platforms, if there's ways to simplify that and say, well, look, we put it on 365 when my user is created and they got access to my network. Some of those integrations between those vendors applies the MFA right across the board, so you don't have to manage multiple MFAs either. You can manage them centrally. That's not always the case, but the industry is working towards trying to simplify that process.
And just quickly, because we're going to talk again in probably the next episode in this series on that we're looking at of cybersecurity and the business consequences for it. Just touch briefly on what is the role of antivirus software or processes these days?
Yeah, look, antivirus has come a long way. Traditionally people knew it as being, a program that stopped you from getting viruses on your computer. There's multiple levels and multiple things that antivirus does. I guess the term antivirus is quite generic now. It's more of a unified threat management or UTM type of product, and that also combines with firewall hardware appliance. But in essence, what it basically is at its simplest form, the antivirus is a program that's designed to protect your individual computer, hardware, phone, tablet, whatever it might be, from viruses, malware, malicious content that is sent to you or transacted through you, or that is picked up from website access and things like that. So if someone gives you an email, sends you an email with a file, the virus protection antivirus filters that, it checks that document to ensure that there's no harmful items on there. Same with your phone. If someone sends you a text message with an attachment, that sort of stuff. Or if someone gives you a USB stick, I've got 3 files on here I need you to look at, are those files protected? That then stems into other things like anti-spam, which actually filters the emails. There's also, web content filtering, which is monitoring your web access, the pop-ups that you're getting, the websites you're going to, are they secure? Are they unsecure? That sort of stuff. So it's quite a comprehensive solution offering, and that can also be made up of multiple different programs. It doesn't have to all be the one. You can have really sophisticated systems that utilizes, different vendors that specialize in different things to create, a good filtered level of protection, because you can never have too much protection.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of what I say.
Yes, so there's multiple levels that you need to be engaged in and aware of. And look, I think we've all concluded that it's not just an IT issue, it's a business issue and a management issue, but there's so many different aspects to it. It's one of those things that I guess really when you go into business, you're not, unless you're an IT person yourself, you're not going to be aware of all of these things, and keeping up with it's going to take a lot of time. There's a lot of value in engaging somebody to manage your IT for you. And look, is that something that's only available to large businesses, or can small business utilise that service?
No,
as well?
absolutely. Anyone that's in need of any sort of assistance from an IT perspective can utilise that. What you generally find is the larger organisations will have internal IT. And in many cases, a lot of those internal IT actually still outsource to IT companies, because the IT companies or the managed service providers out there, their job is to be up to date as much as possible with everything that's happening, because they look after such a large number of clients across a wide variety of different markets and different needs. So their job, an MSP's job, is to be as clued into every possible scenario as possible, so they can provide the best level of support and service. Internal IT teams generally know one network, they focus on that one network, and each person has a specific role within that network. Whereas a managed service provider, their help desk staff will get 10 calls a day of 10 different problems that are totally independent of each other. So, quite often, for a small business, they can't afford the internal person, they can't afford an internal IT team, so they will outsource that. And with that, they get, a company that's got, experience, knowledge, understanding. There's often a team of people. So there's plenty of resources and plenty of, service that's available to them. And, and they can be held accountable as well, because, they're managing the system. And so they are the ones that, come back with the recommendations and the steps to go forward.
And is that a service that your company Unitech
Absolutely.
provides?
Yes, certainly. So we've been doing that for 31 years. So we have a very long history in the IT game, and we have a dedicated team of guys here with a range of different skill sets. So we are an MSP, so it is our job to ensure that we are up to date with this sort of stuff. And predominantly, we help the small to medium businesses in that space. We have some larger clients as well with internal IT who like to outsource some of the sort of day-to-day stuff to us. And we provide, some consulting to them as well from that high-level integration perspective. But yes, that is exactly what we do, and we've been doing it for a very long time. So we've seen a lot of things, and we know a lot of stuff. So we certainly are capable of providing that sort of support.
Great. And look, if our listeners want to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
Look, they can certainly they can give us a call. The best number correctly named 1300 IT help. They can give us a call on that, or visit our website unitech.com.au, which has some more information about what we provide, and they can certainly contact us from there, and we can have a conversation.
Great, fantastic. We'll put those details in the show notes, and
Sure.
Look, we're going to continue this conversation about cybersecurity, and I think next time we talk, we're going to be talking about some of the specific strategies that might be available to business owners. So I'm looking forward to that, Luke.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be joining you again for a discussion on some cybersecurity tips for small business. So
Fantastic.
Thanks a lot for joining us.
Looking forward. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks for listening. Do you have a question you'd like our team of experts to answer? If you do, send your question to podcast@thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. To hear more from The Business Behind Your Business, don't forget to subscribe using your favourite podcast player. Or you can visit the businessbehindyourbusiness.com website.